Before I get into the next game, let me take a minute to address something several people have asked about. In the early 2000s, an animated TV series based on Kirby started to air in the US. Kirby Right Back at Ya. I only ever caught a few snippets of it here and there since I was in high school and Saturday morning TV was one of the last things on my mind. I'm planning on getting to it eventually, but watching this show would be about a 40-hour investment, and I just can't spare that kind of time right now, especially if I want to get this retrospective finished by the end of the year. But from what I've seen, it looks fun. Kirby is cute, the animation is really colorful and energetic, and it did run for a few years, so there must be something here that kept people interested, right? I feel like there's a lot in this show that might be worth discussing, so I doubt a 6-minute video would really be enough to do it justice. I won't know for sure until I sit down and watch the series on my own, then I'll know exactly how I want to approach it. But with that said, let's move on to what I'm sure you've all been waiting for. This is the big one. This is the Kirby game that everyone says is a cult classic, the one everybody keeps begging for a sequel or a re-release of. Kirby Air Ride. This was originally supposed to be an N64 title, and there were some prototype videos floating around that promoted it as an upcoming release. But after several years of missed deadlines, cancelled projects, and general development hell, finally came out for the Gamecube in 2003. So was it worth the wait? Well, in my personal opinion, no. I am one of the fortunate people to actually own a physical copy, and I really don't get it. This is the game? This is the one everybody gushes over? The whole time I was playing it, I kept asking the question, why? What is so amazing about this? There are 3 main modes. Air Ride is the eponymous racing mode, and you're given a choice of several different vehicles to experiment with. Some are easier to use than others, so there's definitely an element of personal preference and skill tiers involved, but their differences are really not very well defined. All you get is a short blurb that says what a particular vehicle is good or bad at, so you really have to try them all to find the one that's best for you. Air Ride presents itself as a child-friendly racing game, one with very simple controls that anyone can easily figure out. Your only buttons are turn and boost. So yeah, the same button you use to go faster is also used as your brake.
And nothing's more simple than a single giant button.
The idea is to drift around turns while holding boost, and then release to get a burst of speed coming out. It seems simple enough, but I really never managed to get the hang of it. I can drift in Mario Kart just fine, but here, there's something about the controls that even when they work, they don't feel satisfying to use. As a racing game, Air Ride just feels tediously slow, a fact that is reflected in the speedometer in the corner. Look at Kirby riding along at the blistering pace of 19 miles per hour. And if that's too fast for you, you can even turn it down to a slower speed. It feels like when you drive off the track in Mario Kart and have to chug your way through the grass and mud to get back, except it's like that 90% of the time. There are various enemies roaming around the tracks, and you can suck them up by pressing the A button in their vicinity. Yes, again, the same button for brake and boost. You just have to hope you're close enough to them that the game will recognize the context. If they have powers, you will be able to use them for a brief period, again, by pressing A. Some of these, like Sword and Wing, are used automatically, whereas others, like Ice and Needle, need to be activated, which of course leads us into the best and worst powers of the game. Most of these powers aren't really bad, but none of them are terribly useful either. I suppose the one that I would always actively seek out is Plasma, because you have to rotate the control stick to build up power. At the very least, it gives you something to do instead of just steering and boosting, and it is satisfying to nuke your opponents with a fully charged shot. As for the worst, I'm going with Wing. It activates automatically when swallowed and ends up completely changing how Kirby controls. Boost is taken away in favor of better maneuverability, so if you're used to the nuances of a particular vehicle, you're gonna have to learn a brand new moveset for the brief moment you have the power. Now, I will fully admit that there are probably people who are absolute beasts at this game and will seek out these powers in order to get an amazing time, but I really can't be bothered because the game doesn't do a good job of making it enjoyable. I'm not motivated to play it enough to actually get great at it. There are only 9 tracks, and this is at a time when even Double Dash came with 16, and one of them starts out locked, so you can play through all of them in only about a half an hour, at which point you move on to Top Ride. This is a top-down race with smaller tracks. It feels kind of like a racing game you might see in Mario Party as a minigame. It's fun, but it's obviously not supposed to be the primary draw. You have a slew of other weapons you can pick up, and various track hazards to avoid. It's not bad, but not terribly deep or engaging either. Finally, we get City Trial, and this is probably the mode everybody who played this has the most fond memories of. You're dropped into a massive 3D city with up to 3 other players, and you race around collecting badges to power up your racer until time runs out, at which point you use the stat boost you gained in the city to compete against each other in a stadium minigame. This is by far the deepest and most fun part of the game, and if there's any mode to keep coming back to, it's this one. After each round in City Trial, you're dropped into a random stadium event, and once you've played through one in the main mode, you can choose to play it again whenever you want. But that means playing through City Trial again to try to get a new one. It's fun once or twice, but jeez. The overall presentation is very Smash Bros. Inspired. You have achievements and unlockables, and even the UI looks like a midway point between Melee and Brawl, which is appropriate given the release dates. They were all done by graphic designer Michiko Sakurai, so I think it's obvious she has a particular style she likes to use. But on the whole, it feels like a first draft for concepts that would eventually be perfected in later Smash Bros. Games. That's what Kirby Air Ride reminds me of the most. It seems like a collection of minigames that would have been thrown in as side dishes to a main course. But the main course in this case just isn't very appetizing. I think it endears in the hearts of gamers almost out of a sense of loyalty. There were prototypes, but there weren't any other Kirby games for the Gamecube, so it was this or nothing. Nostalgia can be a very powerful thing, so if you love this game, don't let me take that enjoyment away from you. I think the biggest problem with Air Ride isn't the slow racing, but just the lack of sufficient content. You can see pretty much everything the game has to offer in less than 2 hours, and then the rest of it needs to be unlocked. I don't mind unlockables in theory, but the problem is, the game is just boring. If the core gameplay was more interesting or offered more to enjoy, I wouldn't have any problem putting enough hours into it to unlock all the courses and playable characters. But here, it almost feels like they're bribing you to keep playing. Like the lollipop the doctor gives you for being a good boy and sitting through something painful. Yeah, the race wasn't that interesting, but you did get to check a box. That's something, right? There's a massive checklist of achievements to fill in from the different game modes, and you usually end up unlocking 1 or 2 after each race just by coincidence. But looking at this huge wall just makes me go, no thanks, I'm good. Maybe people remember Air Ride for what it could have been, but not so much what it actually was. There is a lot of potential in City Trial mode, as evidenced by the presence of Smash Run and Super Smash Bros. For 3DS. There are even some people who have gone so far as to create machinima in this mode. Honestly, the most fun I had with this game was just jumping off the vehicle and exploring the 3D city on foot as Kirby. There's a lot of detail in this map, but you almost never get to see it because you're always racing around at top speed. It reminds me of Super Mario Sunshine or any of these other 3D platformers just with Kirby. Moving around feels good, and it seems like there's a solid foundation for a full 3D Kirby game if they just put some more effort into it, but without any actual objectives, it just feels hollow. I do feel like this concept is worth exploring again. There's a lot of lore in the Kirby series that could be expanded upon in a vast 3D map, but Air Ride is not that kind of game. There's definitely something in here, but it's buried under several layers of incomplete ideas and not quite fully realized game modes. There is some fun to be had by playing it with friends, but I know Kirby is capable of flying much higher than Air Ride can take it.